My name is Olivia Bennett. I was 31 years old when I discovered that the person I trusted most had been planning to betray me long before I ever realized something was wrong. At the time, I thought my biggest concern was preparing for my wedding. The ceremony was only 6 weeks away. My fiancé, Daniel Carter, and I had spent nearly 2 years planning our future together. We had already purchased a small house outside Asheville, North Carolina. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture had been delivered, and wedding gifts were beginning to arrive almost daily. Everyone around us said we were the perfect couple. I believed them. Looking back now, I realized that the warning signs had been there all along. I simply chose not to see them. The first sign was my younger sister, Vanessa. Vanessa had always been competitive. When we were children, she wanted whatever I had. If I received a bicycle for Christmas, she suddenly hated her own and demanded a better one. If I earned an award at school, she somehow found a way to make the conversation about herself. Our parents laughed it off as sibling rivalry, but it never really stopped. Even as adults, Vanessa seemed unable to celebrate anyone else's happiness, especially mine. When Daniel proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains, Vanessa smiled and hugged me. Then she spent the rest of the evening asking how expensive the ring was. I should have paid attention. Instead, I told myself she was just being curious. A month later, I asked her to be my maid of honor. She accepted immediately. At first, she appeared excited. She helped me tour venues. She offered opinions about dresses. She volunteered to organize the bridal shower. Everyone praised her dedication. What nobody knew was that she had another reason for staying so involved. One afternoon, I came home early from work because a meeting had been cancelled. Daniel's car was parked in the driveway. That was unusual. He normally worked until 5. I walked inside quietly. I expected to find him in his office. Instead, I heard voices coming from the kitchen. Daniel and Vanessa were standing near the island. The moment they saw me, both of them jumped. It happened so quickly that most people would have missed it. But I noticed. Vanessa took a sudden step backward. Daniel nearly dropped a coffee mug in his hand. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Vanessa laughed. "Wow," she said. "You scared us." I remember feeling strange. Not suspicious. Just strange. The explanation sounded reasonable. She claimed she had stopped by to discuss wedding decorations. Daniel agreed. A conversation moved on. But something about their expressions lingered in my mind. That night, I asked Daniel whether everything was okay. He looked confused. "What do you mean? You seemed nervous earlier." He laughed. "You're imagining things." I wanted to believe him. So I did. A few weeks later, my best friend Hannah invited me to lunch. Halfway through the meal, she set down her fork. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. She hesitated. Then she said, "Are Daniel and Vanessa spending a lot of time together?" The question caught me off guard. "What?" "I've seen them together a few times." I felt defensive immediately. "They're helping plan the wedding." Hannah looked unconvinced. "Maybe that's all it is." I asked where she had seen them. She mentioned a coffee shop downtown, a restaurant, a bookstore. None of those places sounded wedding-related. Still, I dismissed it. Daniel loved reading. Vanessa loved coffee. Coincidences happened. By the time lunch ended, I had convinced myself Hannah was overthinking things. Unfortunately, she wasn't. The next major warning arrived during my bridal shower. Vanessa organized everything. The decorations were beautiful. The food was perfect. Guests couldn't stop complimenting her. I noticed something strange, though. Every time someone mentioned my upcoming marriage, Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Not sad. Not emotional. Angry. Almost resentful. When my aunt gave a toast about finding true love, Vanessa disappeared into the bathroom for nearly 20 minutes. When she returned, Her makeup had been touched up, as if she had been crying. Later that evening, I asked whether she felt okay. She smiled too quickly. Of course. Again, I ignored the feeling in my stomach. I was becoming very good at ignoring things. A few days later, Daniel claimed he needed to travel for work. It wasn't unusual. His job as a marketing consultant often required short trips. He packed a suitcase and left early Friday morning. Saturday afternoon, I received a text from one of my coworkers. The message contained a photograph. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my heart stopped. The image showed Daniel sitting outside a restaurant. Across from him sat Vanessa. Neither looked aware they were being photographed. Daniel was smiling. Vanessa was touching his hand. I stared at the picture for several minutes. My hand started shaking. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, babe." His voice sounded relaxed. Normal. As though nothing had happened. I asked where he was. "Charlotte." The lie came so naturally that it frightened me. I told him someone had seen him. There was a long pause. Then he claimed Vanessa had driven to Charlotte to discuss wedding plans. The explanation sounded ridiculous. Even he seemed aware of that. But somehow I still wanted to believe him. That was the most embarrassing part. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. Yet, I kept searching for reasons to avoid the truth. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't tell them about the photograph. Instead, I sat on the porch with my mother. She studied my face for several moments. Then she said something I never forgot. "Sometimes people tell us who they are. The problem is that we keep listening to who we hope they are." At the time, I didn't fully understand. Within a month, I would. The wedding date grew closer. Invitations had been mailed. Guests booked hotels. Everything appeared normal on the surface. Meanwhile, the tension inside me continued growing. I began noticing small details. Secretive text messages. Sudden silences when I entered rooms. Phone calls Daniel refused to answer around me. Vanessa constantly asking questions about my schedule. Where I would be. When I would return home. What time I planned to leave work. Looking back, it feels obvious. At the time, I felt trapped between suspicion and denial. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The event was held at a country club overlooking the lake. Friends and relatives gathered to celebrate. Everyone seemed happy. Except me. The entire evening felt wrong. Daniel barely looked at me. Vanessa spent more time talking to him than to anyone else. Several guests noticed. I saw the expressions, the whispers, the uncomfortable glances. For the first time, I realized other people had started seeing what I refused to acknowledge. After dinner, I walked outside alone. The air was cool. The lake reflected the moonlight. A few minutes later, Hannah joined me. She didn't waste time. "Olivia, you need to know something." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She handed me her phone. On the screen were several screenshots. Messages. Dozens of them. Between Daniel and Vanessa. I felt sick immediately. The text stretched back months. Flirting. Inside jokes. Late-night conversations. Plans to meet secretly. Then I reached a message that stole the breath from my lungs. Vanessa had written, "After the wedding, she won't matter anymore." I read it 3 times. Then 4. Daniel's response appeared directly beneath it. I know. The world seemed to tilt sideways. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Hannah grabbed my arm before I lost my balance. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The evidence was undeniable. Everything suddenly made sense. The nervous expressions. The secret meetings. The lies. The resentment. The strange behavior. All of it. My fiancé and my sister had been having an affair. For months. Maybe longer. The realization should have made me cry. Instead, I felt strangely calm. almost numb. A quiet certainty settled over me. I wasn't standing at the edge of heartbreak anymore. I was standing at the edge of a decision. Inside the clubhouse, everyone continued laughing and celebrating what they believed would be tomorrow's wedding. None of them knew the truth yet. But that was about to change. Because Hannah wasn't finished. There was one more thing she needed to show me. And when I saw it, I realized Daniel and Vanessa hadn't simply betrayed me. They had spent months planning something far worse. Something that would have humiliated me in front of everyone I loved. What they didn't know was that I had discovered their secret less than 24 hours before the ceremony. And by the time the wedding guests arrived the next morning, I would be ready. Very ready. For what came next. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Strangely, I wasn't crying. The tears had already come and gone during the night. What remained was clarity. Daniel thought he was about to marry me. Vanessa thought she had gotten away with everything. Neither of them realized I knew the truth. As guests began arriving at the venue, I sat quietly in the bridal suite while my makeup artist worked. My mother noticed something was different about me. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. I smiled. For the first time in months, I am. At 11 o'clock, the ceremony began. The garden was filled with friends, relatives, and co-workers. Daniel stood at the altar looking confident and relaxed. Vanessa stood beside him as maid of honor, wearing a satisfied smile that made me sick. When the music started, everyone turned toward the aisle. I walked forward slowly. Daniel smiled. Vanessa smiled. They thought they had one. The officiant welcomed everyone and began the ceremony. Everything proceeded normally until he asked if anyone had something to say before the marriage continued. That was my moment. I raised my hand. The officiant looked confused. Guests began whispering. Daniel frowned. "Olivia?" he asked. I stepped forward and pulled a small envelope from my bouquet. "I actually do have something to say." The entire garden became silent. I turned toward the guests. "Before I marry Daniel, I think everyone deserves to know who he really is." The smile vanished from his face instantly. Vanessa's eyes widened. I removed several printed screenshots from the envelope. The same screenshots Hannah had shown me the night before. "I discovered these messages yesterday." A nervous murmur spread through the crowd. Daniel immediately stepped forward. "Olivia, stop." "No," I replied calmly. "I've been silent long enough." I began reading. One message. Then another. Then another. The guests listened in stunned silence as Daniel and Vanessa's affair unfolded in front of them. My aunt covered her mouth. My father looked ready to explode. Daniel's parents stared at their son in disbelief. Then I read the message that hurt the most. "After the wedding, she won't matter anymore." The crowd gasped. I looked directly at Vanessa. "You wrote that." She couldn't even deny it. Her face had gone completely pale. Daniel tried to grab the papers. "This isn't what it looks like." The excuse sounded ridiculous. Everyone knew it, including him. Vanessa suddenly started crying. But nobody rushed to comfort her. For once, there was nowhere to hide. I turned back to the guests. "I invited all of you here because I believed I was celebrating a future with someone who loved me. Instead, I learned my fiancé and my own sister spent months lying to me." The silence felt heavy. Then my father stood up. "Leave," he said. He wasn't speaking to me. He was looking directly at Daniel. Daniel glanced around desperately. No one defended him. Not one person. His confidence disappeared completely. Vanessa tried to approach me. "Olivia, please." I stepped back. "No." That single word ended the conversation. Within minutes, Daniel and Vanessa walked out of the venue together while hundreds of eyes followed them. The wedding was over, but something unexpected happened afterward. People stayed. Friends hugged me. Relatives surrounded me. My mother held my hand while guests told me I had done the right thing. Someone suggested we cancel the reception. I shook my head. Why should I lose everything because of their choices? So we celebrated anyway. Not a marriage. A new beginning. The food was served. Music played. People laughed. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. Months later, Daniel and Vanessa tried dating openly. It didn't last. Once the secrecy and excitement disappeared, so did their relationship. Trust built on betrayal rarely survives. As for me, I rebuilt my life slowly. It wasn't easy. Some days were painful, but every day became a little lighter. I learned something important from the experience. The people who betray you often believe they are taking your future away. What they don't realize is that they are removing themselves from it. And sometimes that turns out to be the greatest gift they could ever give you. When I think about that wedding day now, I don't remember the humiliation. I remember the moment I chose myself. And that was the day my real life finally began.